Welcome to AP Environmental Science. In this video, we are going to briefly discuss some of the causes and impacts of ocean acidification. Now remember, ocean acidification has to do with ocean pH, and prior to the Industrial Revolution, the average ocean pH is 8.2. But today, we are going to see an average ocean pH of 8.1. Few things to keep in mind. First of all, the pH scale is logarithmic, which means a change in one whole number on the pH scale is actually a tenfold change in hydrogen ion concentration. Also keep in mind the ocean pH is not the same everywhere throughout the entire ocean. It's a pretty big place and requires a fair amount of circulation, but having these changes in ocean pH are significant. In fact, in the last 200 years, the ocean has become about 30% more acidic. But wait a minute, you're probably thinking that in order to be considered an acid, something has to have a pH of less than 7, and that's correct. And when we're talking about ocean acidification, a better way to state that would actually be ocean neutralization, or moving closer to that 7, which is neutral. However, in most textbooks and on the AP exam, they refer to this phenomena as ocean acidification because hydrogen ions are being released. Now, the way that this works and what is causing ocean acidification is this increased concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and we're specifically looking at carbon dioxide. Remember, carbon dioxide comes from anthropogenic sources such as burning fossil fuels and having the increased rates of cellular respiration faster than the rate of photosynthesis. Now also remember, the ocean absorbs a lot of this excess carbon dioxide. In fact, the ocean holds 50 times more carbon dioxide than the atmosphere. Now I want to look here at the Keeling curve, which is from Mauna Loa Observatory that we've looked at in the last few videos. The atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration measured at Mauna Loa is the red line. Remember, Mauna Loa is a little triangle there on the map in Hawaii. We're also measuring on here the pH of the ocean water and the concentration of carbon dioxide of the ocean water. So we can see that the concentration of carbon dioxide in the ocean is increasing pretty steadily along with that increase in the atmosphere. And we can see, since it was measured beginning in the early 90s, that ocean pH has been steadily decreasing. And there are many anthropogenic activities that contribute to this increased carbon dioxide. Again, those are things like burning fossil fuels, the emissions from vehicles, which are also burning fossil fuels, and from things such as deforestation, where now that wood that's been harvested is no longer doing photosynthesis, removing that carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So instead of removing carbon dioxide, that will slowly break down and emit more carbon dioxide. Now there's several steps in this process. So when the carbon dioxide is absorbed by the ocean, there's several chemical reactions that occur. The first one is that water combines with the carbon dioxide to produce carbonic acid, which is actually a weak acid. And that carbonic acid dissociates into hydrogen ions and bicarbonate ions. Remember that hydrogen ion concentration? That is what impacts the pH. So the greater concentration of hydrogen ions, the lower the pH, or more acidic the pH is going to be. Now we can look at the process using this diagram, or we can look at it using these equations. Personally, I prefer the diagram, but you may be somebody that thinks more analytically and prefers the equations. Either way, you get the same message. So with the diagram here, you can see the carbon dioxide is being dissolved into the ocean, reacting with the water to produce that carbonic acid. Then the carbonic acid dissociates to produce those hydrogen ions, making the water more acidic, and it also produces those bicarbonate ions, which can turn into carbonate ions. Now this impacts the marine organisms that rely on calcium carbonate, and they rely on a consistent pH in order to do normal life function. So one of the big species that we are focusing in on here is coral. When you have ocean acidification, it makes it really difficult for these corals to form shells, and that's because we're losing that calcium that they use to form calcium carbonate. And calcium carbonate is that skeletal system that they have. So the shells of ocean creatures are made of calcium carbonate, and in order to make the calcium carbonate, they have to combine calcium ions with carbonate ions. So with ocean acidification, we have an increased concentration in hydrogen ions, and that's going to alter the amount that's available for these organisms. So those hydrogen ions actually bond more readily with carbonate than the calcium does. So we have this competition over a single resource. So when that hydrogen ion bonds with the carbonate ions, that creates a bicarbonate. And these organisms are not able to extract the carbonate that they need from a bicarbonate ion. And as a result, these hydrogen ions at high concentrations are also going to be able to break down that calcium carbonate and dissolve the shells and skeletons. Now keep in mind, it's going to take a pretty low pH in order to dissolve these shells and skeletons. So that would only happen in those pockets of the ocean water that are experiencing very low pH. The biggest concern here is that the calcium is not available. That's going to have the bigger impact on the coral. So a bit of a summary here on the corals. Remember, corals need free carbonate ions to form their skeletons, and those corals are the foundation of an incredibly biodiverse ecosystem. Remember, the most biodiverse marine or aquatic ecosystem is going to be a coral reef. And if we have damaged corals, that's going to lead to a pretty severe impact on the biodiversity of the reef ecosystem. Now, when we talked about ocean warming, that also damages corals through coral bleaching. And because both of these processes, ocean acidification and ocean warming, are associated with climate change, coral ecosystems are especially vulnerable to changes in the global climate. Now, in summary, you should be able to explain some of the causes and effects of ocean acidification. Remember, the cause is that increase in global atmospheric carbon dioxide, and some of those sources are burning fossil fuels, vehicle emissions, and deforestation. You also should be able to explain the effects, which is the reduced amount of free carbonate ions available to make calcium carbonate shells means that a lot of these marine organisms are not able to create those skeletal structures they need to survive. Now, I included this image here on the summary slide. I think it does a good job of summarizing both ocean acidification and ocean warming. Please send me your questions here, and I hope that as you watch this video, you were able to learn something.